welcome to Hopewell Vision and Coaching, a podcast to motivate you to reach for what you want in life and get it. We're happy you're with us today. You can also join us online at www.hopewellvisionlifecoach.com, where we trust you'll have a visionary start to your week. Now, for your host, the beloved coachess, Lisa Ann.
Hello and welcome. I'm Lisa Ann, and today's episode is entitled, Are We Taught to Be Happy? What is happiness for you? We are going to question your understanding and interpretation of happiness. So let's just get straight into this. What's happiness for you? Is it a supportive network? Being healthy? Being fit? Do we know what happiness actually is? Is it a feeling, a state of being? Is it circumstantial, environmental? Well, my view is happiness changes over time. I think it's dependent on the stage of life that you're at. So, for example, we can have two people who are exactly the same age, but they're at different stages of life. One may be married with children, one may be single and just entering their medical career. Because of these different stages of life, one has experienced giving birth and having a family, running a home, and one may not have. So I think that makes happiness contextual. It's what it means to the individual themselves and the circumstances that they live in. Another thing I think happiness is I think it needs to be congruent with the vision you have in mind for your life. So, for example, if you want to be 10 stone in weight, but you're 12 stone, there's a difference, isn't there, between what you are and what you want to be. And my feeling is if that's not in line with each other, so if what you are isn't what you want to be, I think that causes conflict between being happy and not being entirely happy. So, why is happiness so difficult to establish? If it's contextual to an individual and it changes over time, why does it seem we have an epidemic of people suffering with anxiety or depression or mental health difficulties? What seems to be the problem? Are we born unhappy and have to train ourselves or be trained to be happy? Let's have a quick discussion about babies. So before we're even born, we now know that we have 4D scans of babies. And if you've ever seen one, it can look like a baby is smiling and it can be very distinctive. But the question I pose is, what makes them smile? How do they know in the womb how to smile? And do they have some awareness that smiling is a good feeling? Then, once a baby is born, you can spend the first 6 weeks trying to make them smile. And this can be quite difficult. So another question is, what does this all mean? Now, some health professionals say it's a reflex, that babies learn to reflex and their muscles are reflexing in the womb. Parents may say that they read to them while they're in the room, or they play music, or they ate the right foods. So where does happiness come from? If a baby who's in the womb just has a reflex, and once a baby is born, can take up to 6 weeks to even smile. So we've heard the quotes and sayings about happiness starting from within, but how does that explain a baby's happiness? Is it because they're taught how to smile? So when we try and tickle them, or when we give them mother tongue, or we give baby talk, and we smile at them, is this about babies' copying behaviour as well. Maybe it's as they get older and begin to form relationships, they learn what happiness is. Or maybe it's the changing in environmental factors. There's so many questions that need to be answered about how babies learn what is happiness. So if we fast forward slightly to you and we look at your happiness history. Now, you can have a look at the website, hopewellvision.com. There are a few resources on there that you can look out for. But also, what we're going to talk about here is, can you map out times where you were happy in your life? Is it easier to just identify when we felt sad? I think it's easier to map out the times where things weren't as good, when things were going downhill, where we were feeling down or feeling low. That means, in my opinion, we put sadness over happiness, which means we actually consider it more valuable. So is this intrinsic, or is this down to the influences around us? What I'm trying to do is to get you to think about where your happiness comes from, what it's based on. How does this inform your tomorrow? Now, my background is being a social worker. It's learning about attachment theory. Now, that begins in the womb, and the minute that they are born, that's why a baby is given to their mother and they have that skin-to-skin contact. That's about building attachment. Now, some of you may know there are several different types of attachment, which we won't cover. You'll be able to look that up. But there are several different types of attachment. And what I think is, you start with that attachment with your mother or your caregiver. But I think happiness actually gets more complicated as you get older. I think there's more to contend with, and the environment and the media serve us messages as like, this is exactly what's going to make you happy. To me, I think there's a gap between childhood and adulthood and knowing how to be happy within yourself. If you cannot learn to be your own best friend, how can we expect a child moving into childhood know what that even looks like, what happiness feels like? It's a tall order, isn't it, to have this all together? So therefore, that leads me to think that self-development is something that never stops, because how we deal with problems, it creates our state of mind. So if we deal with them negatively and use aids to numb those bad feelings or take them away, that can create negative behaviour patterns. So if you have never experienced or don't know what happy is, how can you positively manage it? I've read so many things about happiness saying you need to recognise it, you need to realise it, you need to know it from within. It's almost as if it's just a knowing. How can you know what you don't know? If that's all that's been modelled to you is poor self-control, for example, how can you be told, how can you be taught you need to realise what happiness is and it's from within? It seems there needs to be a bridge, some kind of blueprint to show positive and healthy habits that will foster happiness in the future. We have several programs for children and adults, and I also offer this service through Birdie May Therapeutic Play, looking at how we can foster happiness. But that indicates there is a need, that we actually don't know how to be happy. We'll be right back just after this.
Welcome to Hopewell Vision and Coaching, a podcast to motivate you to reach for what you want in life and get it. We're happy you're with us today. You can also join us online at www.hopewellvisionlifecoach.com, where we trust you'll have a visionary start to your week. Now, for your host, the beloved coachess, Lisa Ann.
So welcome back to Hopewell Vision and Coaching podcast. I'm Lisa Ann. So we've gone through a bit of discussion about the history of happiness, looking at happiness in babies, childhood and adulthood, and looking at trying to bridge some of the gaps. I'd like to share a quote by Deepak Chopra. He says, "Be happy for no reason like a child. If you're happy for a reason, you're in trouble because that reason can be taken from you." What I would like to do now is go through the top tips for happiness. I am going to direct you to the website for more tips at hopewellvision.co.uk. But my first tip is, does the vision you have for your life line up with what you're doing? So what I'm saying is, does your actions actually line up with what it is you want to achieve? Because often we can have dreams, we can have goals, but if we are to map out on a pie chart how much time we spend working towards those goals, we may be quite surprised that we're doing very little to get there. So I would suggest that we make some more effort looking at ways we can spend time working towards our goals and our dreams. One way of doing this that I can offer is the 4G program. This is via the Meetup group, and again, you can check out the website for more details. But this is going to create a community where we set goals, we are accountable to each other, and we're going to help each other through meeting our own goals. Because what we need to do is, when we have goals, have a very clear plan of how to achieve them and execute those plans. If they just remain words on a piece of paper, nothing happens. There's a saying, nothing changes if nothing changes. So with that, I'm going to encourage you to life map. Now you can go to the website again and get some resources for this, but a life map essentially looks like a spider web, and each area of the web is a different area representing your life. So that could be relationships, health, love, finance, career, and you basically mark yourself in each area, say for example, out of 10. You need to look at those results and see where the shortfalls are. It's important to reflect, because if we don't reflect, just like if you don't get children reports for academic achievement, you don't know where you need to find a way to improve. And when we just don't do anything at all, things can get out of control. So we are now on top tip number 3 in what do you need to make you happy? I just want to point out that these are just my opinions. These are my experiences that I'm sharing with you. The first tip was to look at whether your actions line up with your goal or your dreams, and making sure that there is a correlation between the two. If there's too much distance, if there's a gap, then that means you're not working towards your goal. It's just words on a piece of paper. Then we looked at having a life map and mapping out your life in all the different areas, so we can reflect on what our lives look like to us. And we would just end it on the note that if we don't reflect, then that means things can easily get out of control, and you haven't got a handle, you're not managing your own life. And that can lead to unhappiness. And when you have unhappiness, that can lead to bad choices, which lead to negative behaviour patterns. There are different types of life wheels you can look at, with specific areas like just stress or money specifically. But it's up to you what you'd like to do. But you can check out the website just as a starting point. So top tip number 3, find a person or group who's inspiring or in line with your goal or dream. Now, you know the saying, every good man. It's the same for happiness. I think you need support. You need a sounding board. You need a group. You need people that represent your goal or represent and reflect your dream. Now, we have tried to create these opportunities with Hopewell Vision via our meetup group and the podcast. And of course, if you'd like to join us, you're more than welcome. It would be great to see you. But it's important that we have these groups so we don't get into negative behavior patterns, which ultimately lead to anxiety or depression. So we need to basically create our own happiness. So how do we do that? Start with the life wheel. Pick out the one that means the most to you, where you need the most support. Decide on a very small goal and start working towards it.
We thank you for listening to Hopewell Vision and Coaching podcast. We trust that today your beloved coachess or her guests have motivated you to follow your light. Tomorrow's not promised, so reach for it and get the life you want today. Be sure to leave a review and subscribe so you can be first to get the next episode. You can continue to drink from the well of hope if you join us online at hopewellvisionlifecoach.com or live fearlessly with our Art Therapy Life Strategy program, teaching you to have that life. Blessings until next time.